Blood stained the concrete as Judge Jordan Carter was forced to his knees, mocked and handcuffed by officers who thought he was just another black man to humiliate. But when his true identity was revealed, silence swept through the courthouse. How did the very man they tried to crush end up sitting in judgment over them? If this story stirs something in you, give it a like and share it with others, because what happens next is a lesson no one should forget. Let's step into the story. I was there that morning, close enough to see the scuffs on his shoes and the crease he kept pressing flat on his old charcoal suit. Jordan Carter walked the steps like he'd done it 1,000 times, chin steady, shoulders squared, the kind of calm that doesn't brag. 15 years in and out of those doors, and you could tell the building knew him. He nodded at the brass plate that always caught the light, adjusted his tie like a habit, and kept moving. If you weren't paying attention, you'd have missed the tired weight behind his eyes. I didn't. It looked like a man who's carried the same load for longer than anyone should. At the metal detector stood a new-faced Kenny Doyle, the kind of guard who makes his posture a weapon. He was pale, square jaw, the security patch still stiff on his sleeve. He stepped into Jordan's path like a gate finally slamming shut. "Where are you headed?" he asked, voice flat but sharpened at the edges. Jordan didn't break stride until courtesy required it. He slipped his wallet open, held out his ID with 2 fingers. Inside, same as every morning. Kenny didn't look at the picture the way most people look at pictures, up, down, back, to a face to confirm. He stared at it like he was searching for a reason to say no. His thumb traced the laminate. His eyes never touched Jordan's. "Step back, sir." The "sir" landed like a warning, not respect. On my left, 2 white attorneys breezed through the other lane's shoes like mirrors, coffee steaming over their case files. Nobody asked them for anything. One of them laughed at a joke, the other told a clean, easy laugh that floated to the ceiling. If there was a line here, it wasn't painted on the floor. Jordan stepped back exactly 1 pace. "That identification is current," he said. Calm, not a tremor. You could hear the discipline in the way he measured each word. Kenny lifted his radio. He could have asked for a supervisor. He could have tapped a keyboard. Instead, he tilted his chin and spoke like he'd been waiting to say it. "Possible security threat at the main entrance," he announced. "Male, mid-40s, refusing to comply." The words were neat prepackaged, a script someone had practiced in a mirror. Refusing to comply, Jordan still had his wallet open. A low murmur rolled through the atrium. People slowed without admitting that they'd slowed the way a deer slows when the wind changes. A courthouse intern in a blazer hugged her laptop to her chest and hovered behind a potted plant. A juror smoothed his summons and pretended to read. A man in a denim jacket lifted his phone screen, already recording. Jordan put the ID down on the table. "You can verify it," he said. "I'll wait." Kenny's jaw clicked once. "Hands where I can see them." Jordan held them out, palms forward, empty. It's funny how quickly open hands can look like a challenge if someone is determined to be afraid. I saw the switch flip in Kenny's eyes the moment a person decides what they're seeing, then makes the world fit it. A beat of silence stretched. Then the elevator doors parted with their soft hydraulic sigh, and Martha Ellis arrived like the clock striking true. 25 years in that building had carved a map of resolve into her face. She wore flats that meant business and carried a tablet like it was a badge. "What is happening?" she called across the lobby. The words didn't ask. They demanded inventory. Kenny didn't glance at her. "Ma'am, step back." Martha didn't. She looked at Jordan, and everything in her expression went from confusion to recognition to outrage in a blink. "Mr. Carter, ma'am," Kenny said, louder step. "Back." The room contracted around those 2 words. The juror folded his summons small enough to hide in a fist. The intern disappeared a little deeper behind the ficus. I felt my own shoulders tighten, not because anything had happened yet, but because you could feel what was coming. Jordan didn't move. He didn't lower his hands. He didn't raise his voice. "Kenny," he said, finally using the guard's name, "you are making a mistake." The radio at Kenny's shoulder crackled as if it wanted to agree with someone. He pressed it tighter against his vest. "Unit response requested," he said into the mic level, and sure, potential threat escalating. Escalating. The only thing rising in that lobby was the temperature of everyone's blood. Another pair of attorneys slid past the other lane, the scanner chirping green like a friendly bird. One gave the scene a 5-second glance, calculated risk versus schedule, and chose schedule. Their perfume dragged a citrus ribbon through the air. Martha stepped forward. "He works here," she said, cutting each syllable clean like she was dictating minutes. "For 15 years. Kenny extended his palm like a stop sign. "Ma'am, do not interfere with an active security screening." Martha's mouth opened on a protest that would have had names, dates, and a list of supervisors who could end this in 5 keystrokes. She didn't get the chance to say any of it. The first siren cut through the glass from far off, thin then fuller, then fully here. It came with a second siren, then a third weaving together until the sound filled the atrium and pushed breath out of lungs. Red and blue began to pulse against the marble floors, turning the seal in the center of the lobby into something unsteady, as if the ground itself couldn't decide what it was. Heads turned in a single motion, the way fields turn when the wind runs a hand across them. The denim jacket man held his phone higher. The intern peeked out from her plant eyes wide. The juror put his fist with the crumpled paper behind his back, as if to hide his own presence from what was coming. Jordan exhaled once through his nose. If there was fear, it sat somewhere private, not for the room. He looked at Martha and gave the smallest nod, like a man tipping his hat at a neighbor on a bad weather day. Then he returned his gaze to the doors. The cruisers slid to a stop out front with a precision that felt rehearsed. Engines idled like a growl you hear before you see the dog. The sirens didn't die so much as get strangled into silence. Through the glass, 3 drivers' doors sprang open in near unison, and the officers stepped out, eyes already hard. Inside, nobody spoke. The building itself seemed to hold its breath. I realized my hands were clenched around nothing the way you clench when you know a glass is about to shatter, and you can't stop it, only witness it. Kenny adjusted his belt, squared his shoulders, and took a half step forward like a man about to claim he'd saved the day. Martha stood her ground, hands tight on the tablet knuckles paling. Jordan didn't move at all. The doors swung wide and the courthouse swallowed the sound of boots on marble. That was the moment when the noise rushed in and the quiet rushed out, that the day decided what kind of story it wanted to be. I remember how fast it happened, though. Every second felt stretched long enough to burn into memory. The heavy doors burst open and in came Derek Harlan, broad-shouldered jaw, locked, the swagger of a man too used to being feared. Everyone in the courthouse seemed to know his reputation, loud, reckless, and proud of it. He didn't need to scan the room. His eyes went straight to Jordan Carter and curled with disdain. "Get him out of here!" Derek snapped, his voice carrying like a gavel. Wilson Reed moved instantly, gripping Jordan's arm like he'd been waiting all morning for the excuse. His hand was rough, almost eager. On the other side, Mark Patterson, the rookie, hesitated just a breath enough for me to see something flicker across his young face. Doubt, unease, maybe the smallest spark of conscience. But then training and fear overrode it, and he reached for Jordan's other arm. Jordan didn't resist. His voice came quiet but steady, the kind of tone that filled a space without rising. "I work here. This is my courthouse." That should have meant something, but Derek barked out a cruel laugh, shaking his head like Jordan had told the oldest joke. "Shut your mouth, imposter. Nobody's buying that." The words cut sharper than any shove. It wasn't just dismissal, it was denial of his place, of his years, of his dignity. Martha Ellis broke through the crowd, her voice rising in outrage. "You can't do this!" But Wilson swung a stiff arm out, catching her shoulder, forcing her back with a roughness that shocked even the onlookers. Her tablet clattered across the marble floor, the sound ringing like broken glass. The gasp that rippled through the lobby was almost as loud as the sirens had been. Phones lifted everywhere. Dozens now. Screens glowed like restless eyes, capturing every angle. A few high school students pressed together by the railing, their mouths open, their knuckles white on the banister. They were trembling, but not one of them looked away. Jordan was dragged through the doors, shoes scraping on marble until they hit pavement. The air outside was colder, sharper, and it bit harder because it was public. They shoved him against the squad car, his spine slamming into the metal with a hollow clang. I swear I felt that sound in my own ribs. The cuffs came out. The metallic snap echoed against the courthouse walls, cruel in its finality. The steel bit into Jordan's wrist too tight, and you could see the strain in the tendons of his hands. That sound, the cold click of authority turned weapon, made people flinch. Derek leaned in close, his breath hot with mockery, his smirk wide enough for the crowd to see. "You don't belong here. Never did. Stay in your place. Wilson laughed under his breath. Patterson looked away, jaw tight like a boy caught in the wrong fight, but too afraid to step out. And Jordan, he didn't look at Derek. He didn't look at the cuffs or the crowd, or even the blood beginning to bead where the steel pinched his skin. He lifted his gaze upward. His eyes found the courthouse security camera mounted high above its red light, blinking, and he looked straight into it. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't surrender. It was something else entirely. Calm, steady, defiant in silence. His eyes said more than his mouth ever could record this. Remember this. Justice will see this. That look unsettled the air. You could feel it. Derek still sneered, but it didn't land as hard. The rookie shifted his weight. Even the crowd pressed against the edge of the lot seemed caught between fear and awe. Martha was still at the doors, shouting hoarsely, fighting to push past the officers who blocked her. Her voice cracked as she tried to force the truth out, words tumbling but never making it far enough. You don't understand, but they drowned her out with orders barked like gunshots. The students outside huddled closer, their phones shaking in their hands. A woman in the crowd whispered, "This isn't right." A man muttered, "Not again." Someone else murmured, "God help him." The voices overlapped, fear mixing with anger, the whole scene teetering between helplessness and outrage. And through it all, Jordan stood steady, spine pressed to the squad car wrists, bound the world trying to shrink him to nothing. But he refused to bend. Even cuffed, even shoved, he carried himself taller than the men who mocked him. Derek finally jerked him upright, turning him toward the gathering crowd like a trophy. "Now you look like you belong," he spat, the cruelty dripping in every syllable. Laughter rippled from the officers beside him. It was harsh, echoing the kind of laughter that wasn't joy, but dominance. A sound passed down, generations made to humiliate, to remind. But Jordan didn't give them what they wanted. No begging, no fear. Just that same calm, proud silence that seemed to draw strength from the very humiliation meant to break him. And that silence, it landed harder than any shouted protest. For the first time, the crowd realized this wasn't just another arrest. Something about it felt different, larger, as if everyone there sensed that the story wasn't finished. That what was being written in this parking lot wasn't an ending. It was the opening of a reckoning. I remember looking around and seeing it in people's faces, the shift. Phones steadied, not shaking now. Voices grew louder, angrier. The silence around Jordan wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy. It was waiting. And as the officers tightened their hold, the distant echo of another siren reached us, faint but approaching. The tension thickened again. Because we all knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I'll never forget the moment they forced him down. Derek shoved hard between Jordan's shoulder blades, and the man who had walked these halls for 15 years collapsed onto the asphalt. His knees hit first hard. The sound was sharp, sickening. Fabric tore and a dark stain spread fast across his trousers. Blood seeped through, glistening against the gray of his suit. Jordan winced, but he didn't cry out. The pain was there. You could see it in the tightening of his jaw, the way his breath caught, but he swallowed it down. That silence was louder than any protest. Wilson circled him like a vulture, his smirk cruel and easy. "Look at this," he sneered. "Another black man thinking he's special, thinking the rules don't apply." His voice carried for the crowd to hear. It wasn't about law. It was about humiliation. Patterson, the rookie, stood behind them, stiff as a statue. His hands twitched at his belt, his lips pressed tight. His eyes darted between Derek Wilson and the man bleeding at their feet. You could see the war on his face, what he'd been told to do, and what he knew was wrong. But fear kept him frozen. Silence kept him complicit. From the crowd, a voice broke the tension, a girl no more than 16. Her hands shook as she held up her phone, live streaming like the others. "He didn't do anything," she cried. "He's innocent." The words sliced the air. Dozens of heads turned toward her. Derek spun around, his face dark with fury. "Shut your mouth," he barked. He pointed at her like a loaded gun. "Say one more word and you'll be in cuffs too." The girl flinched but didn't back down. Her phone trembled, still pointed at the scene. Tears welled, but her voice stayed strong. "Everyone can see what you're doing." Gas rippled through the onlookers. Some clutched their mouths. Others muttered prayers. The moment felt like it could ignite a riot or sink into silence. And then Jordan lifted his head. His face was pale, streaked with sweat, but his eyes were steady. His lips parted, and in a voice quiet yet resonant enough to carry, he said, "I choose to remain silent." The words weren't defiance. They weren't surrender either. They were deliberate, chosen with care, weighted with history. It was a statement that belonged in court, not on blacktop. And for a heartbeat, just one, the whole place went still. Derek froze mid-breath. Wilson's grin faltered. Even the sirens in the distance seemed to hush. The crowd shifted as if they'd felt the earth tilt. Phones lifted higher, dozens now live streaming comments flying across screens faster than thumbs could keep up. You could feel it spreading beyond the lot, thousands of unseen eyes watching, then tens of thousands. The world was being pulled into that parking lot in real time. Jordan's silence had become louder than any shout could have been. Martha wasn't silent. She bolted back inside skirts, swishing her shoes, pounding the marble. She knew what most of us didn't, that only someone with authority greater than Derek's could stop what was happening. Her voice echoed as she shouted for a judge, for anyone in power. "We need help now outside." Derek bent low, his shadow falling across Jordan's face. He grabbed the man's chin, roughly yanking his head up until their eyes locked. His fingers dug into Jordan's jaw, forcing him to look into his sneer. "What game are you playing?" Derek hissed, each word a snarl. "What trick do you think you're pulling?" Jordan didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He just stared back, steady, quiet, the way a mountain stares at a storm. His eyes held something unshakable, dignity, patience, power, wrapped in restraint. And for the first time, Derek faltered. It was just a flicker, a twitch at the corner of his mouth, a tremor in the hand that gripped Jordan's face. But it was there. He had stared into silence and found it staring back unafraid. The crowd noticed. A murmur rose like wind before thunder. Some began chanting softly, "This is wrong, this is wrong," their voices growing with every repeat. Others stood in stony quiet, their phones lifted like shields. Patterson's chest rose and fell fast. His knuckles whitened as his fingers clenched into fists at his side. His lips parted like he wanted to say something, but no words came. He was caught in the machinery of the moment, too green to fight it, too human to ignore it. Derek released Jordan's chin with a shove, straightening, forcing his swagger back on like armor. He glanced around at the crowd, at the phones, at the girl who still streamed through tears. His laugh was brittle, forced. "You people think this means anything," he said, gesturing at the cameras. "Nobody's gonna care. Nobody ever cares." But the lie rang hollow. Everyone felt it. Everyone knew. This wasn't the kind of silence that fades. This was the kind that spreads. Blood dripped down Jordan's shin, darkening the pavement beneath him. He shifted slightly enough to steady himself on one knee, his hands cuffed in front, his shoulders still squared. The picture he made, bleeding, bound but unbroken, seared itself into every screen, every witness. And in that image, Derek's dominance cracked. The girl whispered into her phone, "They're hurting a judge." The words were soft, almost uncertain. But they were out there now, flying across 1,000 feeds. And they were about to change everything. Because in silence, Jordan Carter had just taken control of the story. They dragged him like a criminal, wrists bound, blood soaking through his torn trousers. Derek Harlan and Wilson Reed flanked him, gripping his arms as if Jordan might suddenly sprout wings and fly. Patterson trailed behind his steps, stiff, his jaw clenched so tight it seemed to ache. He kept looking around, glancing at the phones, the crowd, the blood. His youth was written all over his face, uncertain, conflicted, and terrified of the orders he was following. "Get him in the car," Derek barked, shoving Jordan toward the cruiser with the arrogance of a man who thought the world bent to his voice. And that's when it happened. The courthouse doors slammed open again, and Judge Patricia Reynolds burst out, her robe trailing her face, flushed with fury and fear. Her heels struck the pavement like hammers as she charged forward, pointing straight at Derek. "Stop!" she screamed. Her voice cracked through the air, carrying over the crowd, over the buzzing of phones, over the rattling chains of Jordan's cuffs. "Do you even know who you're arresting?" The entire lot froze. People gasped. Cameras swung to capture her. Derek paused mid-step, his hand still gripping Jordan's arm. He frowned annoyance more than concern. Judge Reynolds' chest heaved as she drew breath, her voice shaking, but unyielding. She jabbed her finger toward Jordan, her words hitting like a gavel. That man is Chief Judge Jordan Carter. It was as if lightning had split the sky. The crowd erupted in a stunned hush. No sound, no movement, just the collective intake of breath. Every phone zoomed in lenses, locking on Jordan's face. Bloodied, bound, humiliated, and suddenly impossibly revealed. Wilson blinked hard, his grip faltering. "Chief," he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible. His hands trembled where they clutched the chain of the cuffs. Patterson froze in place, his eyes widening. He stumbled back one step as though the ground itself had shifted beneath him. But Derek only laughed. The sound was harsh, jagged, desperate. "You're kidding me," he sneered. "This clown chief judge. What's next? He's the governor. Nice try, lady. Impersonating a judge. That's another charge." The words rang hollow, but Derek clung to them like a drowning man clutching driftwood. Then the radio at Wilson's shoulder crackled to life. Static hissed, followed by a sharp voice. "Unit 23, confirm. Did you say Jordan Carter? Repeat, Jordan Carter. That's Chief Judge Carter. He's confirmed on site. Do not proceed. I repeat, do not proceed." The message cut the air like a blade. The crowd gasped again, this time with a current of electricity behind it. Dozens of phones angled closer, streaming the revelation live. Wilson's face drained of color. His hands shook violently as he stared at the cuffs he'd just locked around Jordan's wrists. Patterson stepped further back, shaking his head in disbelief. The murmur of the crowd swelled into a rumble. "Judge Carter, Chief Judge. Dear God!" And then I saw it. Derek's swagger cracked. His laugh died in his throat, leaving only a thin rasp of breath. His hand twitched, and in his panic it went toward the holster at his side. The moment his fingers brushed the grip of his gun, the entire parking lot seemed to collapse into silence. Every phone caught it, every eye locked on that gesture. Patterson's face went pale. For a second his fear evaporated, replaced by something stronger, resolve. He lunged forward, throwing himself between Derek and Jordan, his arms spread wide. His voice cracked but carried like thunder. "Don't do this, Sarge! Don't you dare!" The words ripped through the tension. The crowd erupted, shouting, screaming. Some cried out in panic, others in outrage. The chant began again, louder this time. "This is wrong! This is wrong!" Wilson stumbled back, dropping his hands as if the cuffs themselves burned. His lips trembled, his voice breaking. "It's true," he whispered, staring at Jordan like he'd never seen him before. "It's really him." Jordan said nothing. He didn't need to. He stood cuffed, bleeding, but his silence radiated more power than Derek's barked orders ever had. Derek's hand hovered at his gun, his breathing ragged sweat beading on his forehead. His eyes darted between the crowd, the cameras, the rookie blocking his path, and the man he'd just humiliated, the man now revealed as the most powerful judge in the county. It was the kind of silence that suffocates, the kind that makes every heart beat louder in your ears, the kind where one wrong move could turn the parking lot into chaos. And in that silence, it became clear Derek Harlan wasn't in control anymore. Derek's laugh cracked wild and desperate, as if clinging to the last rope he thought he still had. His face flushed red as he shouted to the crowd, his words spitting like sparks. "Fake papers. It's all a scam. Don't believe this garbage, he's a fraud." But the denial rang hollow. You could hear the panic leaking through his voice. He wasn't convincing anyone, not even himself. Jordan Carter stood straighter, wrists still cuffed, blood still staining his knees. He didn't shout. He didn't match Derek's rage. Instead, he slowly reached into his jacket pocket where Wilson had stuffed his phone earlier. Every eye followed the motion. Every camera zoomed closer. Jordan tapped the screen, and in the glow of sunlight, he held it up for all to see. His voice came low, calm, but heavy with authority. "Officer Derek Harlan." He began his tone like a judge reading charges from the bench. "Badge number 2847. 3 years on the force, 17 complaints of excessive force, all buried. Each one dismissed, each one ignored." The words sliced the air sharper than a blade. The crowd erupted with gasps. People leaned forward, phones shaking in their hands. The live stream counters shot upward, thousands, tens of thousands, then more. Comments scrolled so fast no one could read them. The world was watching. Derek's smirk evaporated. He tried to laugh, but it stuck in his throat. Jordan turned his gaze steady and unyielding to Wilson Reed. "And you, Officer Reed, He continued 15 stops of black men in this very parking lot in just 2 months. No charges filed, no crimes found, just harassment repeated and systematic. Wilson stumbled backward like he'd been struck. His face went pale, his hands twitching at his sides. The crowd groaned in disgust. Some booed. Others shouted shame. Phones pushed closer, capturing every reaction. The live stream feeds exploded. People online weren't just watching, they were enraged. You could feel the tide turning. And then Martha Ellis reappeared, pushing her way to the front of the crowd. She held her courthouse-issued tablet like it was evidence in trial. Her face was flushed, but her voice was steady, resonant. "Enough," she declared. "Chief Judge Carter has entered this courthouse 3,847 times. Every single visit logged, every entry recorded. This is official data." She held the tablet high. The screen glowed with the records, the numbers undeniable. The crowd roared in outrage and vindication. You could hear the voices rising. "He belongs here! He belongs here!" Derek's fury boiled over, his face twisted, veins bulging at his temple. "Lies!" he screamed. His hand flew to his holster, fingers gripping the weapon he thought might give him control again. But before the gun cleared the leather, Patterson moved. The rookie lunged forward, grabbing Derek's wrist with both hands. His voice cracked but carried like thunder. Don't you do this, Sarge." The moment stretched like glass about to shatter. Derek strained his body, trembling with rage, but Patterson held firm. The rookie's face was pale, his lips shaking, but his courage was there, raw, unpolished and real. The crowd erupted, no longer silent, no longer hesitant. They began to chant, voices rising in unison, drowning out Derek's fury, drowning out his laughter, drowning out every excuse. "Justice, justice, justice." It rolled like a wave across the lot, louder and louder, echoing off the courthouse walls, overwhelming the sound of police radios, swallowing Derek's sputtered denials. Wilson dropped his head ashamed, while Patterson still held Derek back. Martha's hand trembled around the tablet, but her eyes burned with conviction. And through it all, Jordan stood tall in silence, his dignity unbroken. The laughter that had once mocked him was gone. In its place, the thunder of a people who had seen the truth and weren't about to forget it. The sound of the crowd carried farther than anyone expected. Chants of "justice, justice" thundered against the courthouse walls, echoing down streets until it was impossible to ignore. Phones streamed, voices shouted, and the tension turned the air thick as smoke. And then the convoy appeared. 2 black sedans rolled up, flanked by official SUVs. The murmurs rippled. Someone recognized the seal on the doors. The noise hushed for a heartbeat, then surged louder as the figure stepped out. It was Mayor Linda Warren herself in a navy suit, her strides sharp and commanding. Beside her was Police Commissioner Robert Hayes, a man known more for avoiding conflict than facing it. Both had come expecting a routine security meeting. Instead, they walked into a storm. Linda stopped dead at the sight. Chief Judge Jordan Carter, bloodied on his knees, wrists cuffed in front of half the city. Her face drained of color, then flushed with anger. "What in God's name is happening here?" she shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos. The crowd roared back, pointing, crying out, voices overlapping, too fast to catch. But Linda only needed one look at Derek Harlan gripping his holster and Wilson shrinking behind him. Her fury focused like a blade. "Take those cuffs off him." Now her order cracked like thunder. Commissioner Hayes faltered. His eyes darted between Linda, the furious crowd, and Derek's defiant posture. His lips parted, but no words came. He looked like a man caught between a career and a conscience. Derek seized the hesitation. He planted his boots wide, barking loud enough for all to hear. "No, don't you see he's impersonating? This is a setup. He's not who you think he is." His words sprayed like sparks, desperate, clinging to denial. The crowd erupted in outrage. People screamed, booed, phones waved in the air. Several surged forward, too close, too fast, anger spilling over. Patterson, the rookie, stepped between them and Derek, arms wide, desperate to keep the fury from exploding into chaos. "Stay back," Patterson pleaded, his voice raw. His eyes flashed to Derek. "Stop, Sarge. Just stop." But Derek only shoved against him, teeth bared. "You don't tell me what to do, boy. This is my scene." The chant grew deafening now, a pounding rhythm of fury. "Justice, justice." It rattled windows. It shook the ground. The city itself seemed to demand it. Hayes's hands trembled as he stepped forward, fumbling for the keys at Derek's belt. His face was pale, his forehead slick with sweat. The commissioner, so often confident behind a podium, looked fragile, a man unraveling under the eyes of the world. At last, with hands shaking so badly, the key scraped the metal. Hayes unlocked the cuffs. The chains fell away. The crowd roared, and on Jordan's wrists the deep red welts glowed like open wounds. His skin was raw-marked evidence of humiliation burned into flesh. Phones zoomed closer, broadcasting every detail. Jordan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply straightened, rolling his shoulders back, rubbing the circulation into his hands. He looked at Derek, then at the mayor, then at the commissioner. And then calmly he pulled his phone from his jacket once more. The screen glowed. He swiped. And suddenly the parking lot filled with a voice that wasn't his. Derek's voice. Another black boy playing dress up. Let's see how tough he is without his fancy clothes. The words, clear as day, cut through the crowd like a gunshot. The silence afterward was suffocating. The crowd recoiled, then erupted in rage. Some gasped, others shouted in horror. A woman covered her mouth sobbing. A man dropped to his knees, shaking his head. The students who'd been filming now stared at their phones, tears streaking down their cheeks as Derek's voice replayed over and over, impossible to deny. Linda Warren's face hardened. Her anger wasn't loud, it was deadly quiet. She stepped closer to Derek, her eyes locked on his. You put your hands on the highest judge in this city. You mocked him. You bled him. And now we all hear you for what you are. Her words landed like hammers. Derek's bravado faltered. His jaw worked, but no words came. He glanced at the cameras, at the crowd, at the rookie who'd stopped him, at Wilson, backing away in shame. The chants fell silent. All that remained was Linda's voice, cold and final. You didn't just arrest a man. You assaulted justice itself. The crowd held its breath. Phones steadied, capturing history. Even the wind seemed to stop. The entire city felt balanced on that single moment, waiting for the scales to tip. And in that silence, the power shifted. It was no longer Derek's scene. It was no longer fear's scene. Justice had stepped into the light. The parking lot had turned into a courtroom. No benches, no robes, no gavel, just pavement stained with blood, the roar of the crowd and the cameras of 1,000 witnesses. And at its center stood Judge Jordan Carter, no longer just the man in cuffs, but the man holding the authority of the law in his voice. He straightened his wrists, raw but free, and spoke loud enough for every ear to hear. Officers Derek Harlan and Wilson Reed, today you have committed crimes: assault on a sitting judge, unlawful detention, violation of civil rights. You have disgraced not only yourselves, but the badge you wear. His words rang like a verdict. The crowd erupted with shouts of agreement, fists raised, tears streaming down faces. It was more than anger, it was vindication. Wilson staggered back, trembling. His lips quivered as he tried to defend himself. I didn't mean I was just following orders. The words sounded weak even to him. He looked down at his hands as if the memory of every stop, every shove, every look of fear from the men he targeted was etched into his skin. Derek, on the other hand, lost what little control he had left. His face was red, twisted in rage. Spittle flew as he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. This is a trap. Don't listen to him. It's all a setup, an ambush. You're being played. The crowd booed so loudly his words dissolved into noise. The chant rose again, shaking the air. Justice, justice. And then something no one expected happened. Mark Patterson, the rookie, took a single step forward. His hands shook at his sides. His chest heaved with the weight of fear, shame, and choice. For a long second he froze, caught between the uniform on his back and the truth in his heart. Then he sank down, on one knee. His head bowed, his voice cracked, but it carried clear as day. I swore an oath to protect. I broke it. I failed my oath. I failed him. I failed all of you. I'm sorry. The silence that followed was heavy, unbearable. Then it shattered like glass. The crowd exploded in sound. Some screamed. Some cheered. Many sobbed openly. Phones shook as people tried to capture the moment. Strangers clutched each other, realizing they were witnessing history. Because that image, an officer kneeling before the judge he had failed, was more than apology. It was a symbol. It was the first crack in a wall that had stood for generations. Jordan looked down at Patterson. His eyes softened just slightly, though his voice stayed strong. This is not about one man's apology. This is about truth. This is about justice. He reached into his jacket once more. From inside, he pulled the heavy golden badge, the medallion of the chief judge. It gleamed as the morning sun caught it, casting light across the crowd. He held it high, his voice rising above the roar. This badge does not make me human. It does not give me dignity. That dignity was mine the day I was born. What it does is give me the power to hold men accountable who thought themselves untouchable. The badge glinted. The people wept. Jordan's voice thundered again. But hear me, this is not only about Derek Harlan or Wilson Reed. This is about a system that allowed them to act with impunity. This is about every report ignored, every complaint buried, every silence excused. This is bigger than a few bad cops. This is about the cancer in the system itself. The crowd fell into stunned silence, hanging on every word. For the first time that morning, Derek had no reply. Even his rage had been stripped from him, leaving only emptiness. Wilson covered his face with both hands, his body shaking. Martha Ellis stepped forward, tears in her eyes. She lifted the tablet again, her voice breaking but strong. 3,847 times he has walked through these doors, and 14 times in 2 months they stopped him because of the color of his skin. That's the truth. That's the record. The people roared again. They weren't just angry, now they were awake. Jordan lowered his badge, his voice softer now, but no less firm. Justice does not end in a courtroom. Justice lives here in the choices we make, in the courage to stand, in the refusal to stay silent. Today you witness the truth. Tomorrow you decide if it continues. The chant began once more. Justice, justice, but now it was not just a cry of anger. It was a vow. And in that parking lot, history turned. Barely an hour had passed since the chants faded outside the courthouse, but the echoes still lingered in everyone's chest. Inside a closed chamber, the air was no less tense. Judge Jordan Carter sat at the long oak table, his posture straight, his expression calm but unyielding. To his right, Mayor Linda Warren leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly together. Commissioner Robert Hayes looked smaller than usual, sweat still beading his forehead. Across from them sat District Attorney Sarah Chen, her sharp eyes fixed on every movement as though weighing every second like evidence in trial. And at the far end of the table was Frank Morrison, the head of the police union. Broad shoulders, a thick neck, his jaw locked tight. He came in not to listen, but to fight. This was a misunderstanding, Morrison growled, pounding the table with his fist. An incident blown out of proportion. My men were doing their job. We're not going to crucify them for a mistake. The words landed like poison in the room. Linda's eyes flashed. Hayes shifted uncomfortably, looking away. Sarah Chen gave a small, disbelieving laugh, shaking her head. But Jordan didn't flinch. He pressed a button on the remote in front of him, and the screen on the wall came to life. One by one, videos played, clips already flooding the internet. Derek shoving Jordan onto the pavement. Wilson sneering as he cuffed him. Derek's recorded voice mocking another black boy playing dress-up. The chants of justice roaring in the background. The silence in the chamber was deafening. The weight of the truth filled every corner of the room. Jordan's voice cut through it, steady and deliberate. This is not an incident. This is a pattern. This is not about one bad decision. It's about years of abuse shielded by silence. He tapped again, and more footage rolled: body cam clips, complaint records, civilian testimonies. Incidents Morrison had sworn never saw daylight. Every buried file now lit the screen like fire. Sarah leaned forward, her voice sharp as glass. These are felonies. Assault, falsified reports, civil rights violations. And I'll tell you this, I don't deal in sweetheart deals. They will be prosecuted. No bargains. No backroom handshakes. Morrison's jaw tightened. His face turned red. He barked, "Careful, Chen. Without this union, this city won't have a police force left. You push too far, and you'll be begging for officers to answer your 911 calls." Jordan's eyes narrowed. He swiped to the next slide, financial records, emails. Names highlighted in red. He spoke with quiet precision. "Perhaps you should worry less about the city and more about your own house. Because I have here the disciplinary file of Officer Jason Morrison, your son. accused twice of falsifying reports, once of tampering with evidence. Every time the case disappeared. And every time it was you who signed the waiver. Frank Morrison froze. His mouth opened, then shut. His eyes darted across the room, desperate for support, but none came. Hayes lowered his gaze. Linda's lips pressed into a hard line. Sarah Chen's smirk sharpened like a blade. "You think you can blackmail me?" Morrison hissed. Jordan's reply was calm cutting. "I don't need to blackmail you. The truth already speaks, and the truth has nowhere left to hide." The room vibrated with tension. The union boss who had once silenced judges, buried reports, and bought loyalty, now sat cornered in daylight. It was Linda Warren who broke the silence. She rose to her feet, her voice ringing with authority. "Enough! This city cannot function another day under this rot. We begin reforms now. Not tomorrow. Not when it's convenient. Now." Hayes swallowed hard but nodded. Sarah Chen's eyes gleamed with resolve. Morrison leaned back, breathing heavy fury, burning in his silence. But Jordan Carter did not claim victory. He leaned forward, his voice low, measured the weight of warning in every syllable. "Don't mistake this for an ending. This is only the first step. If this system does not change, if these walls stay rotten, I will take every file, every video, every piece of evidence straight to the Department of Justice. And when they arrive, the entire force will be under federal supervision. You know what that means." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every man and woman in the room understood the gravity. It wasn't just about Derek Harlan anymore. It wasn't just about Wilson Reed. It was about a system teetering on collapse and a city deciding whether it would finally face its truth. Linda's voice cut in one last time, firm and final. "Then we change, starting tonight." The meeting ended, but the storm outside was only beginning. 3 weeks later, the courthouse parking lot was unrecognizable. Where Judge Jordan Carter had once been forced to his knees in blood, there were now chalk drawings of suns, rainbows, and the word justice scrawled in bright colors across the pavement. The air that had been filled with anger now carried the sound of children's laughter. What was once a scar had become a place of healing. Mark Patterson was there too. No uniform, no badge. Just a plain volunteer shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows as he handed out food boxes to families waiting in line. Sweat dripped from his forehead, but he kept moving, kept serving. Some people accepted the food with a nod of thanks. Others hesitated, eyes narrowing, memories still raw. Patterson didn't shrink from it. He met their gaze steady and humble. When a reporter asked why he was there, he didn't dodge the question. His voice cracked, but he spoke clearly. "I betrayed my oath. I betrayed the people I was sworn to protect. I can't erase what I did, but I refuse to let that be the end of my story. That's why I've enrolled in law school. I need to understand justice not as a weapon, but as a duty. I want to make sure no one else has ever failed the way I failed Judge Carter." The honesty carried farther than his words. A woman in line touched his arm softly and whispered, "Then keep going." Another man turned away without a word. Redemption was not complete, not yet, but it had begun. Next came Commissioner Hayes. He stepped up to a microphone set on a small wooden platform. He looked older than 3 weeks ago, his shoulders stooped, his cheeks hollow, his voice carrying the weight of sleepless nights. "I failed this city," he began, his hands gripping the edges of the podium. "I allowed silence to replace courage. I chose comfort over truth. I let fear of my own men outweigh my duty to the people. That ends here. I will testify in court against my former colleagues. No badge, no title, no old loyalty will protect them. Not anymore." The crowd gasped. Some clapped. Others simply stood frozen, processing what it meant for the highest officer in the department to break ranks. But there was no mistaking the tremor in Hayes' voice. It was not rehearsed, it was real. Then Judge Carter stepped forward. The murmurs fell away like leaves in the wind. He didn't need to shout. His very presence commanded attention. His voice carried firm yet measured, his words wrapping around the crowd like truth itself. "Justice," he said, "is not a privilege granted to those with power. It is not a gift that can be taken away. It is the birthright of every single person standing here today. It belongs to the child drawing on this pavement, to the mother waiting in line, to the man who has known only fear when he sees flashing lights. Justice belongs to all of us." The people stood still, their breaths caught in their throats. From the side, a boy pushed through the crowd, clutching a notebook to his chest. He was no more than 10 years old. Jerome. His small face was determined, his eyes wide with something too big for his age. He walked right up to Jordan, then suddenly wrapped his arms around him. "I want to be like you," Jerome said, his voice small but steady. "I want to be a judge." The square went silent. For a moment, all you could hear was the rustle of the wind and the faint squeak of chalk under a child's hand. Everyone leaned forward, waiting, hearts tight. Jordan knelt slightly so his eyes met Jerome's. He placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then promise me this," he said softly but firmly. "Promise that when you hold that power, you will never forget this day. Not for the pain it brought, but for the truth it revealed. Use your power to lift others, never to crush them." Jerome nodded hard, his small fist clutching the notebook tighter. "I promise." The crowd erupted. Tears streamed down faces, strangers embraced applause, thundered across the square. It was not the furious chant of justice that had once filled this place. It was a roar of hope, of unity, of people who believed that something broken might finally be repaired. Parents lifted their children higher so they could see. Elderly men and women wiped their eyes, whispering prayers. And above it all, the courthouse stood in the background, not as a symbol of fear, but as a reminder that even the coldest stone walls could be reshaped by truth. For the first time in years, people looked at that building and did not see corruption. They saw possibility. And as the sun dipped low, painting the chalk drawings in golden light, it felt as if the entire city had taken a breath, one of relief, of healing, and of trust, slowly at last beginning to return. 6 months later, the city gathered once more, this time not in the streets, but in the solemn walls of a courtroom. The same courthouse where chaos had once spilled into the parking lot now held a different kind of reckoning. The jury filed in, faces pale with the weight of what they were about to deliver. Cameras were barred inside, but the air was thick with the knowledge that history was again unfolding. "All counts," the foreman announced, his voice steady, though it quivered at the edges. "On charges of assault, unlawful arrest, violation of civil rights, defendant Derek Harlan is found guilty." The words cracked through the room like thunder. Derek sat stiff, his jaw clenched, the color drained from his face. The man who once sneered at dignity and laughed at silence now found no voice at all. His fist tightened, but his eyes darted, searching for someone to defend him. There was no one left. Even the union had turned away. Wilson Reed sat a few benches back, awaiting his own trial. His head hung low, hands clasped together, trembling. He didn't look up when Derek was led away in chains. He couldn't. His day would come soon enough. But not everyone in that room carried shame. Mark Patterson, now dressed in plain clothes, sat near the back with a group of new recruits. He wasn't there as a defendant, nor as a bystander. He was there as a teacher. Over the past months, he had taken on a new role, lecturing young officers about integrity, warning them about silence, teaching them the lesson he had learned too late. His students watched him closely now, as if trying to measure the weight of redemption in the shape of a man. And in the front row, Martha Ellis stood quietly. She didn't cry, though her eyes glistened. She had seen this courthouse at its worst, had screamed when no one would listen, had nearly been shoved aside. Now she stood with her chin lifted, her gaze fixed on the man who had carried the weight of humiliation and turned it into justice. Judge Jordan Carter. He sat high on the bench, the robe draped across his shoulders, the gavel resting near his hand. The chamber fell into a hush, thick and reverent. For a long moment there were no sounds, no whispers, no movement, not even the shuffling of papers. Just silence. The kind of silence that carried memory, the kind that held dignity, the kind that spoke louder than any verdict could. Jordan's face was calm, his voice low when he finally spoke. "Justice has been served. Not for me, not for one man, but for the people." No applause followed, no chant, just that silence, sacred and unbroken, wrapping itself around every heart in the room. When the session closed, Jordan stepped down from the bench. As he walked through the corridors, aides and colleagues bowed their heads slightly, not in fear but in respect. Outside, the winter air bit cold against his skin. He reached for his phone, and there it was, a message waiting. "See you in court someday, Your Honor." It was signed Jerome. Jordan smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes softening. For the first time in months, the exhaustion lifted, replaced by something else. Hope. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and lifted his gaze. Cameras were allowed outside, and they turned to follow his steps. But it wasn't Jordan they lingered on. It was the bronze plaque mounted near the courthouse parking lot, polished and shining in the pale sunlight. The inscription read, "On this spot, injustice was exposed. May we never need such revelation again." People stopped to read it every day. Some laid flowers. Some whispered prayers. Others simply stood remembering the moment when laughter turned to silence and silence turned to truth. Jordan paused, letting his hand brush against the edge of the plaque. He didn't stay long. He didn't need to. The message wasn't his alone. It belonged to everyone. As he walked away, the city behind him hummed with life again. Not perfect, not free of scars, but changed. And the story that began with humiliation in the parking lot, closed now with a truth carved into stone: justice is not the privilege of a few. It is the right of all. And sometimes when justice is finally delivered, the loudest sound it makes is silence. And that's the lesson we carry tonight. Justice isn't just about courtrooms, titles, or verdicts. It's about dignity, truth, and the courage of ordinary people who refuse to look away. Jordan Carter's silence became a weapon, his resilience a reminder that change is possible when we stand together. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Mac's Stories for more powerful tales that shine a light on truth, justice, and humanity. Your support means more than numbers. It fuels our team to keep creating stories with depth, emotion, and purpose. At Mr. Mac's Stories, we believe every voice matters, every witness counts, and every story leaves a mark. That's our symbol, and together we keep it alive.